Several people watching opening ceremonies, a little bit of it skiing. It's in Russia. I don't know what we think about being in Russia. They had a big blast in the opening ceremony. If y'all watched the opening ceremony, all of those, I mean, it was pretty cool. Big celebration of all, historic 1,000 years of Russian history. Kind of imagine those Russians in the little outlying communities all gathered around their community TV, all thinking in unified thought, boy, I wish this was in color. I don't know. Anyway, we are going through the Bible, and if you can read a table of contents, you can see that today we're talking about Leviticus. And we have gone through Genesis and Exodus, and they are filled with Hollywood-like stories. I mean, they really lend themselves to the cinema. You've got all kinds of drama and action going on in Genesis and Exodus. In fact, there are 2 movies coming out this year. A movie called Noah, which starring Russell Crowe, about Noah and the flood. And then they've got a movie called Exodus, about the book of Exodus. I'm interested to see both of those later this year and how they portray those. And so you read through those, and there's all kind of excitement, and then you get to Leviticus. And if anybody's trying to read along as we're going through the Bible, maybe you stumbled a little bit when you got to Leviticus this time. Leviticus is sort of the bane of Bible readers' challengers, right? I get to Leviticus and I go, okay, God, I'm sorry. I said I would do this, but I can't do it. I cannot make it through this. Leviticus is dry, it's repetitive, it's boring, it's seemingly irrelevant. And it's okay if you can't make it through. I understand. It is that. This is what people think religion is. They get to Leviticus and they go, this is why I don't like church. This is why. But Leviticus is actually, it's important. And it has a lot of aspects about God that when you look at it from a slightly different perspective, you can learn a lot about God and about what He intends for us. And so we're gonna look at that today. Does anybody pick apart movies? Anybody look at movies and they go, you're sort of the annoying one with your spouse maybe, and you go, wait a minute, that guy had his coat on and now he doesn't have it on, or that thing on that desk wasn't supposed to be. Did anybody do that? Yeah, some people raising their hands. You're kind of the one that annoys the people sitting next to you, and they go, okay, I don't care. I really don't care. And yeah, so what we're talking about is we're talking about anachronisms. Anachronisms, big word for things out of time. Some are more glaring than others. The Green Mile, I don't know if you can see a picture of The Green Mile, is a movie with Tom Hanks, and it's about Louisiana in 1935, and it's about executions happening in Louisiana, and a big deal was the electric chair, walking the mile to the electric chair. The problem is that in 1935, hanging was still the legal execution method in Louisiana. It's one of those anachronisms. Now, you don't know that. Some are a little bit harder to see than others unless you examine things a little bit more. This is a truck in a pyramid. That's what this is. It's a truck in a pyramid. Now, what do I mean by this? Some of you are going, what? What? Truck in a pyramid? Okay, imagine for a moment you go on vacation to Egypt. For some reason, you haven't read anything or seen any news on Egypt in the last 2 or 3 years, right? And you and your family decide, we're going to go to Egypt on holiday. And you're walking around dope-to-dope through the pyramids, and you stumble, and you find a rock, and then you uncover the rock, and it's a little triangular rock, and you dig it all out, and you've discovered a new pyramid in Egypt. And of course, because you're the first person that discovered the pyramid, and you haven't seen any of the mummy movies with Brandon Fraser, you decide, I get to go into the pyramid first. So you walk into the pyramid, and over there you see the hieroglyphics on the wall, and you see the sarcophagus over here, and you see the Ford F-150 truck over here, and you see the canopic jars over here. What? And you go, okay, that's not supposed to be there. And you say you have 2 choices at this point. You can either say the Egyptians invented the Ford truck, or somebody's been here before me. Okay, that's all you got left. This is what we get sort of in Leviticus. You get this truck in a pyramid, and you're only left with the 2 options. One example, the most familiar one, is in chapter 11. We're going to look at it real quickly. It's probably one of the most familiar passages for anybody. If you've never read Leviticus, you might know this. It's a passage in Leviticus that talks about clean and unclean animals. And it's about, only the animals that you're allowed to eat, and the pig is one that is unclean, and you're not allowed to eat it because of the rules he sets forth. We know now that pigs carry a parasite called trichinosis. Now, they, of course, didn't know that back then. This is the truck in the pyramid. How did they know not to eat this stuff? This is sort of, you get to this, and people are reading through Leviticus, and you'd wonder, okay, I don't know. This is the author of Leviticus is writing in 1400, around 1400 BC is when Leviticus is written. Nobody knows about germs and parasites. Nobody knows this stuff. It wasn't until, we got the truck in the pyramid. Nobody knows about germs and bacteria and sickness until the late 1800s. This is thousands of years after Leviticus comes along. And so up here, you see these two microscopic images. This is actually the smallpox virus, and this is the leprosy bacteria down here. And so two things that are actually talked about in Leviticus. But you've got a guy named Joseph Lister who comes along in the late 1800s, and he says, maybe we should start washing our hands. Maybe we should have antiseptic during surgery. This is miles away from where they are in Leviticus, yet somehow in Leviticus, they have all of this stuff that they know. You can't touch this. Don't touch this. Stay away from this. Don't do this. Touch, touch, touch. All this touching is bad for you. You know, this hits home, really. I mean, we had Charlie run out the door earlier because he's fever and he's in there shivering. Don't touch me. Please leave. We know this because germs and parasites, right? They didn't know this. These people had no clue, yet they're being told all these things. How do they know? They know because God is telling them. They've gotten a truck in a pyramid. And throughout the book of Leviticus, God tells them, be holy as I'm holy, be pure because I'm pure, be clean because I'm clean. They're not told why. They're not told about the bacteria and the parasites and the viruses. They're not told they're doing it to keep them healthy. They're told, just do it. Because God says do it, be holy because I'm holy. In just a bit, we're going to go through sort of a general outline of the book of Leviticus, because this is a very unfamiliar book. We don't know Leviticus like we know the stories of Exodus and we know the stories of Genesis. So we're going to do a general outline of things that they talked about. But before we get to that, I ask, what's the point? What's the point? Why do we have all these rules? Why do they outline all of this stuff in such, boring, repetitive? And it is very repetitive. I mean, it's over and over and over again. You read through the first 5, 6, 7, 8 chapters of Leviticus and you go, I get it. Please, I get it. Over and over and over again. They say the same things. And so why? What does it accomplish for the Israelites, and what do we get out of it? A couple of things I want us to remember as we go through. One, these things were designed to help them make it through the wilderness, to get to the promised land. A lot of these things were designed to help them live and to help them thrive. Being dirty has physical consequences as well as spiritual consequences. And so these guys did the things that God told them to do, and this kept them moving, kept them walking, kept them going through the desert. All right? So it helped keep them alive. 2, it kept them united. It kept them united. They were different from the people around them, from the pagans around them. The rules that they had were different from the rest of the world, and so it kept them united together as one. They were married to God. And when you're married to God, when you're married to someone, you don't flirt, right? You don't mess with other people. Well, they didn't mess with the other world. They were united together. They had these rules that set them apart from other people. 3, it reminded them to be holy and pure. It reminded them to be holy and pure. You see, they were different because their God was different. Their God was holy. Their God was pure. Their God was ethically different than the gods around them. All the other pagan gods around them are into trickery, are into deceit. They're sexually immoral. They're doing all kinds of things, but their God is different. He is holy. He is ethical different, and he calls them to mimic his behavior, to mimic him. Now, are all these rules necessary for us to follow down to the letter to be saved? No, that's not the point of all this. They were set apart to be different, okay? And that helped them. All of these things helped them in that regard. All right, so let's start kind of going through Leviticus. Leviticus 1 through 7, chapters 1 through 7. This all deals with the sin offerings. The first 7 chapters deal with offerings for sin. Now, they needed this stuff because Jesus had not come yet. And he was the one that took away the sin. He took care of that. They still needed to do all these things. So in chapter 1, you have the burnt offering. This was sort of a general atonement for them. This was declaring that God owned them, that they were owned by God. Then you had the grain offering. This was a thanksgiving. This is kind of similar to what we do when we give our contribution. You're thanking God and giving back what, the blessings that God has given you, okay? A lot of this stuff ended up the priests. It was also kind of supporting the priests who were doing all of this stuff. They ate the offerings. They ate a lot of the offerings. 3, peace offering. Peace offering was a transfer of their guilt. This was to remove their guilt. And interesting enough, only the fat and the kidneys were burned. The priest got the breast and thigh meat, and the worshiper, the one doing it, got the rest of the meat. Remember, they don't have antibiotics at this time. They don't have these things. So the kidneys, the livers, these are things that are filters for the body. They don't want to eat this stuff. We're not talking about cooking techniques and meat thermometers here, okay? They're not eating the things that they shouldn't be eating. 4 and 5, the sin offering. This was for mistakes. Unintentional things that they just, oops, I did that, I didn't mean to do that, I damaged the tabernacle, I hurt my neighbor, but I didn't mean to. Okay, so you had the offerings for those. And then you had the guilt offering in chapter 6 and 7. This was for intentional damage done to the tabernacle or to their neighbor. And a lot of this required either repayment or repair of some sort. So they had to make the offering to be right back with God, and then pay whoever they did to make the damage. And so this is all here. God wants these people to know and wants us to know sin and recognize sin and be able to understand what it is and then get it away from us. All right? And that's what he's trying to get the sin away from us. This is important. And then Leviticus 8 through 10. 8 through 10 is about the ordination of the priests and about the worship of the tabernacle and what they're supposed to do and what they're supposed to wear and how they're supposed to do all of these things. Very, very ritualized. This is the picture, probably several familiar with this picture of the high priest, what Aaron and his sons would have worn and all the different aspects of the outfit, the turban and the breastplate and the sash. This was all very ritualized. We say, well, what's the point of rituals? I don't like rituals. We don't need all those rituals. Yeah, I don't like ritual either. I'm the first one to say that. But we really, when you think about it, we all have rituals. We all brush our teeth a certain way. We all wash our hands a certain way. We all get out of bed a certain way. We all have these rituals, these routines that we do. And really, some of them show the family that we belong to. The way that we do things kind of comes from, how our parents did things or the way that they were shown to do things. And we have these rituals. These identify who they belong to. These rituals identify that they belong to God. They identify that God is telling them, do things a certain way, that you're mine, and you're not like everybody else, and God is separating them. Hey, I'm going to say that a lot. This is an important aspect of Leviticus. God's separating it and calling to be different. The rest of the chapters in Leviticus can all sort of be put under the category of laws of cleanliness. All right, it's kind of what we think of when we think of Leviticus. Yeah, we think of the offerings. This is the boring stuff. If you get through the first 10 chapters of Leviticus, you're doing great, because this is where it's repetitive. It's over and over and over and over and over again. If you get to chapter 11, there's some really cool stuff, some really interesting stuff, I think, in all these laws of cleanliness. It's both physical and ethical, moral cleanliness is what these all fall under, okay? And so some we'll shift in a bit to a moral cleanliness. And these are those out-of-time rules that kept them healthy that we mentioned at the beginning. Out-of-time stuff that how in the world did they know this stuff? How did they know to do this stuff? Chapter 11, clean and unclean foods. These are the things, that kept them healthy. Things that dealt with parasites and bacteria. If you ever wonder why some of these animals are on this list, you read this list and you wonder, well, why in the world can they not eat this, but they can eat this? When you look at all these, there's 4 basic types of different animals that are considered unclean for them. One is animals with parasites. We mentioned the pigs earlier, that pigs have trichinosis, they carry trichinosis, and if you don't cook it properly, you can get it too. And so that's one of the categories. And then you've got animals that can pass parasites or toxins, animals that are hosts for parasites or other toxins. And so this would be rabbits or rodents. So you say, why can't they eat rabbit? Hare is mentioned. Why can't they eat rabbit? I've eaten rabbit. Why can't they eat rabbits and small scurrying little rodents? are known for carrying something that produces tularemia. It's a bacteria, and it's a sickness called tularemia, which is a blood disease, and you get it from touching or being around the rabbit or the rodent's urine or feces. And so you have this parasite. They didn't know about that, but they're walking around, they got sandals on, they're walking around their camp barefoot. Well, you got rabbits all hopping around doing their business. You can get this disease. So that's unclean for them. They don't bother with that. Then you've got food that spoils, like roadkill. Don't mess with the roadkill. We're not in Kentucky. You leave the roadkill alone, all right? And they don't know this stuff, but that you bacteria, rotting meat. Look, we know when we go into our refrigerator and you open it up and it stinks, you don't eat it, right? And we all go, oh, here, smell this meat. It smells nasty. And then don't we do that, right? But they didn't know this stuff about bacteria on rotting meat and all of these things, and so they had to be told. Then you've got food with economic, social strain. Things like horses and camels. These are animals that took so much of their other supplies, their grain, their water. It was just too much that they had to do in order to eat these animals. And so you got these animals. God says, look, this is too much for you. We're going to stay away from these too. Now, see, some of you guys, you love bacon. And bacon is a big deal in our culture now. I mean, you got bacon and chocolate, bacon and burgers. There's a Whataburger that's like bacon built into the burger, bacon on top, bacon-flavored cheese, bacon-flavored sauce. We live in a bacon-inundated culture. And so you're thinking bacon is your filet mignon. You're thinking, I can't eat pigs? Are you kidding me? No, these don't apply to us anymore. Remember, these were time for these people to be healthy and to be fed. We know now to cook things properly, okay? We know now to get rid of the bacteria. Jesus has arrived. Salvation is here. You want to eat your bacon? Go right ahead. Nobody's telling you can't have a heart attack by bacon. Have your heart attack with your bacon. Eat your pound of bacon every morning. It's fine. Would we all be healthier? Maybe. If we followed the laws in Leviticus, followed not eating these animals? Maybe, possibly. God had in mind, all of these people's keeping them healthy, keeping them well, but do we have to do all this stuff? No, we don't. So laws of cleanliness. Chapter 11, and then we have chapter 12 dealt with purification after birth. Again, these people, they didn't know about all the stuff with bacteria and trouble with blood and things of that nature. So they took the boys and the girls and the mothers out apart after birth, and they well, what's the big deal? And it avoided infection. It created bonding with the mother and the child. They had sort of a bonding period where they weren't around everybody else. And so it allowed healing time for the mother. Again, all of these things designed so that they move on. They go forward. And they're not like all these other pagan cultures with them. 13, skin diseases, mildew, fungus. This is a chapter that shows them how to diagnose and how to contain contagious rashes. And some of the things in here that you see, they deal with smallpox, leprosy, scarlet fever, measles. If you read, what the descriptions are of the rashes, they're knowing how to identify what things are contagious and what things are just, that's just basic eczema. They're trying to identify those things. Mildew on the clothes, okay? What do you do with mildew and mold on the clothes? Chapter 14 deals with how to cleanse from these things. How do you get cleansed from the infections and from the mildew? What do you do when you have mold and mildew growing up the walls of your house? Well, if it's inside the house, if it's inside, you got to rip it out, right? You got to rip the stuff out. They get told all this. Look, take it out and destroy it and leave it outside the camp. You don't want mold and mildew all around. So they're being told all these rules. Chapter 15, body emissions. Look, you're dealing with stuff that exits our bodies. That's what they deal with in here, the stuff that comes out of our bodies. And some people may look at this, and both men and women look at this and go, man, they seem like they were awful unfair to the women in this chapter. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, read it. Just read chapter 15. They seem like they were kind of unfair to the women. But when you think about it, God is protecting them. He's not treating them unfairly. During a particular time of Women's Month, they are more susceptible to illness. Okay? There's a pathway in, there's a pathway out. That's the way kind of blood works. So they're more susceptible to getting sick. Doesn't mean they will. It means they're more susceptible to it. So God takes them and says, you go over here, be apart from everybody, and have a little 2 to 7 day vacation from the cooking, cleaning, because Dad's going to do it all. Okay, think about it. It's not God being unfair to those. He's protecting them, okay? And that's the way it went back then. Look, they had a little women's retreat for a few days out on the outskirts of the camp, and men had to just deal with it, and they had to just do what they could. Chapter 16, Day of Atonement. This is where we kind of shift into not the physical, but the moral and ethical cleanliness, okay? He talks about the Day of Atonement, and this was a big deal. This is Aaron going in once a year into the Holy of Holies, into the tabernacle, and approaching God and atoning for all the people's sins for the year for them. And they had a scapegoat, which was a little goat that they put their hands on and put all the sins of the people, and the goat ran off into the wilderness and took the sins with him. Well, this correlates directly to Jesus, that Jesus becomes our scapegoat. Jesus puts his sins on us, and this is a foreshadowing of this, that he puts our sins on him and takes them away. And so then you shift over into this idea of this moral cleanliness. So in 17, you have an idea of the sanctity of life, that life is in the blood, that you don't sacrifice to idols, that it's that life is precious, and you don't want blood laying around the camp. Again, you've got a bunch of blood puddles laying around in the camp. You got the possibility of infection. You got to contain that. You got to do it the right way. Life is precious. 18, immoral, sexual, and pagan practices. These are things like incest, which is mentioned. We know now about genetics. We know about birth defects that can happen when you do. These people, again, they don't know this stuff, but they're being told by God, look, stay away from this stuff. Stay away from this stuff. Things like homosexuality, sacrificing the children. These are all pagan practices that they're mentioning, saying stay away from this stuff, be ethically clean, don't look like the rest of those people, trust me, and do what I'm telling you, you'll be fine. 19, having clean attitudes and fairness. These are things helping those who are less fortunate, helping your neighbor, helping the old, the poor, the strangers. They even had stuff for their slaves. You say, oh, well, slavery. Yes, slavery was a big part of their culture, slavery in the Bible. Female slaves were even more. And they have protections and rights for their female slaves. No other culture at their time had protections and rights for their slaves, especially their female slaves. But they're getting this. They're getting told, this is important. Life is important. Life is precious. Protect those who can't protect themselves. Clean attitudes. Be holy. Be separate. Avoid all pagan practices in chapter 20, talking about other gods. Again, don't worship these other gods. Be holy. I mean, I can't emphasize that enough. He says, stay away from this stuff. Stay away from these immoral practices of the pagans. Be holy. Be set apart. 21 through 25. Purity in the priests and in their worship. So in these chapters, you get things about how the priests are supposed to act. You get how pure the elements of their worship should be. In order to serve God, and you can write this today too, in order to serve God in the official role as the priests, they had to be pure. They had to be seen to the people as being pure and being the types of leaders that they needed to see. You write that today. When you're up on a pedestal, so you're in the limelight, then your expectations expected a little bit more of you. And so you see that here in these chapters. You get the worship elements. You get the festivals that they started celebrating. You get the year of Jubilee here in these chapters. The year of Jubilee was freedom for the slaves. Every 50 years, you would be able to get freedom if you were a slave of somebody. You were protected because if you were poor and your land had been taken away from you in a deal that you had made, you'd get that land back. You would be the original owner of the land, and you would get the land back every 50 years. It was a reset. Every 50 years, the whole sort of economic culture got a reset. And so this was a big deal for them too. And how they continued to follow this. And I think if we followed this year of Jubilee, I'd love this. Wouldn't some of you love every 50 years? It all comes back to you. You made all these loans and you got all these debts. In 50 years, it's gone. You cancel all your debts and you get all the stuff that you used to own debt-free. That's kind of what this was, a year of Jubilee. And so it helped and protected the poor people, helped the people that had gone into debt a little bit. And then the last two chapters of Leviticus, 26 and 27. You get these final warnings about falling away and about doing the things that I said and not being disciplined, because if you don't do what I'm going to say, you're going to get disciplined and things bad are going to happen to you. And then you get how to handle gifts and endowments to the Lord, dedicating things to the Lord. I want to dedicate things in my will to God. I want to give this, how to handle those gifts and those endowments to the Lord. And at the very end, you get this guarantee of God's covenant, that no matter how you act, God will uphold his end of the covenant. Among all of these rules, all of this stuff about how to live in Leviticus, you get verse 46 at the end of chapter 26. And this kind of struck me as I read all this. These are the decrees, regulations, instructions that the Lord gave to Moses on Mount Sinai as evidence of the relationship between himself and the Israelites. As evidence of his relationship between himself and the Israelites. See, God cares about them, and God cares about us, and he's doing all of these things and giving all of these things because he wants that with us. He wanted that with them. He wanted them to know, you can trust me, just do what I say, I got this. He wants to build that with them. And so he's doing all of these things for a reason, for a purpose. Do we know why all the time? No. They had no clue. They didn't know about the terms in the parasite. They didn't know why they were telling them they couldn't eat pigs. But he said do it because he cares. That's Leviticus in a nutshell. That's Leviticus. Now you can read through all the chapters, see some of the details, try to find some of the little things, some of the examples I mentioned. And I encourage you to do that. I encourage you to read through and fun. It's kind of fun. I find it kind of fun in trying to identify, different diseases or, okay, why can't we eat this animal? Look at the birds of prey. Why can't we eat eagles and osprey? Well, they have parasites within them too that are prevalent, very prevalent in them. You read through this stuff and then just do a little quick Google search on this stuff. It's kind of interesting. Everything the Israelites needed to be alive and to thrive, it was God's out-of-time proof of his caring for his people. So how does this help? How does Leviticus help us? It tells that he cares about us, right? It tells us that God's hand is in history, right? God's hand moves in history. He gave them what they needed before they even understood it. It was there. God's hand in history. That approaching God is serious. There's a lot of talk about be holy, be pure. Don't speak certain ways. We say, oh God, so easily. Oh God. And we don't think about it. We don't think about it. But approaching God is a serious thing. To act ethically. To act in a way that God acts. To mimic God. That we should try doing these types of behaviors and not doing the world's types of behaviors. That we need to arrange our lives to remind us of God. Just basically, even down to the things we wear. They had all the things for the priests, and of course they designed the tassels and all these things to remind them of God, to remind them of their relationship with God. And then God's authority over all aspects of life. That he says to be holy, to be set apart, to be different from the world around you. And ultimately, Leviticus just says, God says do it, so you do it. He says, trust me, so we trust him. And some people may say, well, why do I have to be baptized? They understand about baptism. They even know the reasoning behind it. But they go, but why? Can't God just save me without it? God's God. He can save me without baptism. Yeah, he could. God could do anything he wants. He can save us without it. But he said do it. And Jesus did it. And he gave the example of doing it. So we just do it. And somebody says, but why? Well, what about the pigs and the catfish and the shrimp and the camels? How about why? Sometimes you just do it. If you're ready for that, then we want to do that. We want to help you with that. If you've already been there, that's fine. Then let's say we want to be holy the way God is holy. We want to not act like everybody else and act the way God wants us to while we stand and sing.